The emergency beacon cut through space like a scream in the void. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display aboard the UES Prometheus, her weathered face illuminated by the pulsing red warning light. 23 years of service in the Terran Colonial Marines had taught her to recognize desperation when she saw it, and this signal reeked of it. "Ma'am, the transmission is definitely alien in origin," reported Lieutenant James Morrison, his fingers dancing across the communications array. "Universal Translator is picking up fragments. They're asking for help." Chen leaned forward in her command chair, studying the data streaming across her screen. The signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, a region of space that had been declared off-limits to human exploration 3 months ago. The Galactic Council had been very clear about that restriction, citing ongoing territorial disputes between member species. "What kind of help?" Chen asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much combat to be easily fooled. Morrison's face grew pale as he processed more of the transmission. "They're talking about genocide, Captain. Something about their entire species being wiped out. The signal is weak, but I'm detecting multiple ship signatures in that system. Big ones." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Chen's crew of 48 Marines had been returning from a routine patrol along the outer rim when they intercepted the distress call. Now they faced a decision that could change everything. "Captain," called out Sergeant Major Rodriguez from the tactical station. "I'm reading at least 12 capital ships in that system. Energy signatures suggest they're not friendly. Whatever's happening there, it's a full-scale war." Chen stood and walked to the main viewport, staring out at the starfield ahead. The Kepler 442 system was just a bright point of light from their current position, but she knew that somewhere in that distant glow, people were dying. The fact that they weren't human people shouldn't matter, but she also knew the political reality of their situation. "Morrison, patch me through to Colonial Command," she ordered. "Aye, ma'am." Connection established. The holographic image of Admiral Marcus Webb materialized in front of Chen's command chair. Even through the blue-tinted projection, she could see the stress lines around his eyes. The past year had been hard on everyone in the Colonial Defense Force. "Captain Chen, I trust your patrol went smoothly?" Webb's voice carried the formal tone of someone who knew their conversation was being recorded. "Yes, sir, but we've encountered a situation. We're receiving distress calls from the Kepler 442 system. Alien species requesting assistance. They claim they're facing extinction." Webb's expression hardened immediately. "Captain, I'm sure I don't need to remind you that the Kepler 442 system is under Galactic Council jurisdiction. The Zephyrian Empire and the hegemony of Krell are conducting military exercises in that region. With respect, sir, this doesn't sound like military exercises. The aliens are begging for rescue. They're talking about their children being murdered." A long pause filled the communication channel. Chen could almost see the political calculations running through Webb's mind. The Terran Confederation had only been part of the Galactic Council for 5 years, and their membership remained tenuous at best. Most of the older alien civilizations still viewed humans as violent newcomers who needed to be carefully managed. "Captain, your orders are to return to base immediately. Do not engage with any vessels in that system. Is that understood?" Chen felt her jaw clench. "Understood, sir." "Good. Webb out." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Chen alone with her conscience and her crew. She turned to face the bridge, seeing the same conflict written across every face. These were Marines who had sworn an oath to protect the innocent, but they were also soldiers who understood the chain of command. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "the distress calls are getting stronger. More ships are joining the transmission. They're saying the attackers are targeting civilian populations specifically. Schools, hospitals, refugee centers." "How many ships are we talking about?" Chen asked. Rodriguez checked his instruments. "At least 40 civilian vessels, possibly more. They're scattered across the system, trying to escape the combat zone. But the attackers have them surrounded." Chen closed her eyes for a moment, remembering why she had joined the Marines in the first place. Her grandfather had told her stories about the old wars on Earth, about soldiers who had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. She had never expected to face that choice herself. "Morrison, how long would it take us to reach the Kepler 442 system?" "At maximum burn, about 18 hours, ma'am." And how long before our fuel reserves force us to turn back? We'd have about 6 hours in system before we'd need to head home, assuming we want to maintain emergency reserves. 6 hours to make a difference. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. Chen looked around at her crew again, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. Rodriguez, what's our weapon status? All systems green, Captain. We've got a full complement of missiles, and our railgun batteries are charged and ready. Morrison, can you get me a direct line to those alien ships? Yes, ma'am. Opening a channel now. The main screen flickered to life, showing a chaotic scene aboard what appeared to be an alien refugee vessel. The beings on screen were tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and sorrow. One of them stepped forward, and, when it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in perfect English. Please, anyone who receives this message, we are the Valdari people. Our homeworld of Veltos Prime is under attack by the Zephyrian Empire. They have declared us an inferior species and are systematically destroying our colonies. Our military was defeated 3 days ago. We have only civilian ships left, and they are hunting us like animals. The alien's voice broke with emotion, and Chen could see smaller figures in the background that were clearly children. The sight of them huddled together in terror made her decision easy. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Marines. We have received your distress call. Help is on the way. The alien's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. Terrans? But, your government, the Galactic Council, has forbidden intervention. The Galactic Council isn't here, Chen replied firmly. We are. Transmit your coordinates to all civilian vessels. We'll establish a rally point and get you out of there. Captain, Rodriguez whispered urgently, our orders. Chen turned to face her crew, seeing the mix of loyalty and uncertainty in their expressions. These were good people who had followed her into impossible situations before, but she couldn't ask them to throw away their careers without understanding what they were choosing. I know what our orders are, Sergeant Major. I also know what our oath means. Every one of you swore to protect innocent life, regardless of species or political affiliation. Right now, there are children dying in that system while we sit here debating politics. She walked to the center of the bridge, making eye contact with each of her officers. I'm taking the Prometheus into the Kepler 442 system. Anyone who wants to be transferred to the escape pods can do so now, with full honors and no questions asked. But anyone who stays is committing to this mission, regardless of the consequences. The bridge remained silent for several long seconds. Then, Sergeant Major Rodriguez stood at attention. Ma'am, the crew of the Prometheus stands ready to follow your orders. One by one, the rest of the bridge crew stood and came to attention. Morrison was the last to stand, and, when he did, he was smiling. Ma'am, request permission to inform the engine room that we'll be needing maximum burn to the Kepler 442 system. Chen felt a surge of pride in her chest that threatened to overwhelm her composure. Permission granted, Lieutenant. Take us in. As the Prometheus changed course and began accelerating toward the distant system, Chen returned to the communication channel with the Valdari ship. This is Captain Chen again. We're en route to your position, but we need to know what we're facing. How many Zephyrian ships are in the area? The Valdari leader consulted something off-screen before responding. Our last intelligence report showed 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, plus escort vessels. They have been systematically destroying our evacuation ships. Captain, I must warn you, the Zephyrians are a warrior culture with technology superior to most Galactic Council members. A single Terran vessel cannot. Let us worry about that, Chen interrupted. Right now, I need you to coordinate with the other civilian ships. Establish a convoy formation and start moving toward the outer edge of the system. We'll meet you there. Understood, Captain. And, thank you. Even if this mission fails, the Valdari people will remember that someone tried to help when the rest of the galaxy looked away. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with the weight of her decision. In 18 hours, they would either be heroes or criminals. Probably both. Morrison, I want you to send a message drone back to Colonial Command. Full recording of our situation and our decision to intervene. Make sure they know this was my choice, not the crew's. Already on it, ma'am. Should I include anything else? Chen considered for a moment. Tell them that the Terran colonial marines remember their oath, even when it's inconvenient. As the hours passed, the Prometheus continued its high-speed approach to the Kepler 442 system. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, checking weapons systems, reviewing tactical data, and preparing for a battle that would likely be their last. The Zephyrians had a reputation throughout the galaxy as ruthless warriors who showed no mercy to their enemies. Rodriguez approached Chen as she stood watching the stars streak by through the viewport. "Captain, I've been thinking about our tactical approach. 12 dreadnoughts is a lot of firepower. What do you have in mind, Sergeant Major?" The Valdari mentioned that the Zephyrians have been hunting civilian ships across the system. That means their forces are spread out, not concentrated. If we can engage them in small groups, we might actually have a chance, Chen finished. "Good thinking. What else?" "The Zephyrians rely heavily on energy weapons and deflector shields. Our kinetic weapons and missile systems might give us an advantage at close range." Chen nodded. It was a slim hope, but it was better than no hope at all. "Start working up attack patterns. Focus on hit-and-run tactics. We can't win a prolonged engagement, but we might be able to cause enough chaos to give the civilians time to escape." As they drew closer to their destination, more distress calls began filtering through the communication array. The Zephyrians were indeed conducting a systematic campaign of extermination, targeting refugee convoys and even individual escape pods. The cold efficiency of it reminded Chen of the worst atrocities from Earth's history. "Captain," Morrison called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. They're ordering us to turn back immediately." "Put it through." The main screen filled with the image of a reptilian creature in elaborate military regalia. When it spoke, its voice carried the arrogance of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Terran vessel, you are entering a restricted military zone. By order of the Zephyrian Empire, you will reverse course immediately or be destroyed." Chen stepped into the camera's field of view. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Marines. We are responding to civilian distress calls in accordance with interstellar law. We have no quarrel with the Zephyrian Empire, but we will not allow the massacre of innocent people to continue." The Zephyrian's scaled features twisted into what might have been a smile. "Foolish human. You think your primitive vessel can stand against the might of the Empire? We have conquered 100 worlds. Your entire species is barely worthy of notice." "We'll see about that," Chen replied calmly. "Chen out." The transmission ended, and Chen turned to address her crew one final time before they entered the combat zone. "In about 2 hours, we're going to face an enemy that outnumbers us 12 to 1. They have superior technology, more firepower, and they've never known defeat. But they've made one critical mistake." She paused, looking around the bridge at the determined faces of her Marines. "They think we're just another primitive species that will run away at the first sign of real danger. They don't understand that Terrans don't abandon innocent people to monsters. They don't know that our ancestors fought impossible battles and won them through sheer determination. And they sure as hell don't know what happens when you threaten children in front of a Terran Marine." Rodriguez grinned. "Ma'am, I think they're about to get educated." "That they are, Sergeant Major. That they are." The Prometheus continued its approach, carrying 48 Marines toward a battle that would either mark the beginning of humanity's reputation as a force for good in the galaxy, or serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of human recklessness. Either way, Chen knew they were making the right choice. In the depths of space ahead, the Kepler 442 system waited, filled with predators and prey. But predators, Chen reflected, sometimes found themselves face to face with something they hadn't expected. Something that fought back. The edge of the Kepler 442 system looked like a battlefield frozen in time. Debris from destroyed Valdari ships drifted in silent clouds, reflecting the distant starlight like scattered diamonds. Captain Chen watched the tactical display with growing anger as the true scope of the massacre became clear. "Sensor sweep shows at least 30 destroyed civilian vessels," reported Lieutenant Morrison, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "No life signs. They didn't even try to take prisoners." "Contact the Valdari convoy," Chen ordered. "I want their exact position and status." The main screen flickered to life, showing the same blue-skinned alien leader from before. Behind him, Chen could see dozens of his people working frantically at control stations. The ship was clearly overloaded with refugees. "Captain Chen, Thank the stars you made it. We have managed to gather 17 civilian vessels at coordinates 347 Mark 892. But, the Zephyrians have discovered our location. 3 of their dreadnoughts are moving to intercept us. How long until they reach you? 43 minutes, by our calculations. Chen turned to Rodriguez. That's cutting it close. What's our intercept time to those coordinates? 37 minutes at full burn, Captain. We can beat them there, but not by much. Do it. Morrison, I want you to scan those approaching Zephyrian ships. Full tactical analysis. I need to know everything about their capabilities. As the Prometheus adjusted course toward the refugee convoy, the crew worked with practiced efficiency. In the engine room, Chief Petty Officer Williams pushed the fusion reactors beyond their recommended limits. The ship trembled with barely contained energy as they raced through space at maximum acceleration. Captain, Morrison announced, I'm getting detailed scans of the Zephyrian vessels. They're big, each dreadnought is about 4 times our mass. Heavy armor plating, energy shields, and enough firepower to level a city. But, there's something interesting in their design. Shen moved to look over Morrison's shoulder at the tactical display. What am I looking at? Their power distribution, ma'am. Those energy weapons consume enormous amounts of power when fired. If we could force them to engage multiple targets simultaneously, we might be able to overload their power systems. Explain. Each dreadnought has enough power for sustained fire from about 6 weapons at once. But, if they try to engage more targets than that, they have to choose between weapons power and shield strength. Rodriguez joined the discussion. So if we split their attention, we might be able to get some shots through their defenses, Chen finished. Good work, Morrison. Keep analyzing. I want to know every weakness they have. 20 minutes later, the refugee convoy came into visual range. It was a heartbreaking sight, 17 ships of various sizes and designs, all clearly civilian vessels never meant for combat. They moved in a tight formation, trying to protect each other as they fled toward the edge of the system. Captain Chen, came the transmission from the Valdari leader, the Zephyrian ships will be in weapons range in 15 minutes. Our ships have no weapons, no shields. We cannot fight them. You won't have to, Chen replied firmly. My crew and I will handle the Zephyrians. You just focus on getting your people out of here. She switched to the ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage 3 enemy dreadnoughts in defense of civilian refugees. The odds are not in our favor, but we have advantages they don't know about. We're faster, we're smarter, and we're fighting for something more important than conquest. Battle stations. Throughout the ship, Marines moved to their positions with calm determination. In the weapons bays, gunners loaded the railgun batteries with high explosive rounds designed to punch through heavy armor. Missile tubes were armed with the latest Terran warheads, each one capable of devastating a ship's hull if it could get past the defenses. Captain, Rodriguez reported, all weapon systems ready. Damage control teams standing by. We're as ready as we're going to be. Chen settled into her command chair, watching as 3 massive shapes appeared on the long-range sensors. The Zephyrian dreadnoughts moved with the confidence of apex predators, their formation perfect and their approach unhurried. They had no reason to fear a single Terran vessel. Morrison, open a channel to the lead Zephyrian ship. Channel open, ma'am. The main screen filled with the image of a different Zephyrian officer, this one wearing more elaborate armor and carrying himself with even greater arrogance. I am War Commander Thesek of the Glorious Hunt. You are the foolish human who dares interfere with Imperial justice. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Chen stood and faced the camera squarely. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Marines. Those are innocent civilians under your guns, Commander. I'm ordering you to stand down and withdraw from this system. Thesek's reptilian features showed what might have been amusement. You order me? A primitive human orders a war commander of the Empire? Your arrogance will make your destruction all the more satisfying. Commander, you have one chance to walk away from this. Take it. There will be no walking away, human. Your ship will burn, and then we will finish exterminating the Valdari vermin. Perhaps we will add your species to the list of inferior races marked for cleansing. The transmission ended, and Chen turned to her crew. Well, we tried diplomacy. Rodriguez, prepare to engage. Morrison, signal the refugee convoy to begin emergency burn toward the system edge. Aye, Captain. All weapons locked on target. The three Zephyrian dreadnoughts began to spread out, clearly intending to surround the Prometheus and destroy it quickly. Each ship was a massive wedge of dark metal, bristling with weapon emplacements and emanating the kind of malevolent presence that spoke of countless worlds burned. Range to target, 800,000 kilometers and, closing, Morrison reported. They're accelerating toward us at 200 Gs. They want to end this fast, Chen observed. That works in our favor. Rodriguez, prepare firing solution Alpha 7. Solution locked, Captain. Chen watched the tactical display as the enemy ships continued their approach. At this range, their massive energy weapons would be at maximum effectiveness, while the Prometheus's kinetic weapons would have limited impact. But she had no intention of fighting a conventional engagement. All hands, prepare for emergency acceleration. We're going in fast and hard. The ship lurched as the engines pushed beyond maximum rated power. On the tactical display, Chen could see the Zephyrian formation adjust slightly, clearly not expecting the small human vessel to charge directly at them. Range 600,000 kilometers. Enemy ships are powering weapons. Stay on course. Don't give them a stable target. Range 400,000 kilometers. They're firing. 3 brilliant beams of coherent energy lanced through space toward the Prometheus. Chen gripped her command chair as the ship rolled and twisted, using every bit of its superior maneuverability to avoid the incoming fire. One beam passed close enough to overload several sensor arrays, but the ship remained intact. Range 200,000 kilometers. We're entering effective missile range. Fire tube 1 through 6. Full spread. 6 Terran missiles streaked away from the ship, their advanced guidance systems immediately beginning evasive maneuvers as Zephyrian point defense systems opened fire. The enemy ships continued their barrage of energy weapons, forcing the Prometheus to maintain constant evasive action. 3 missiles destroyed by point defense. 3 still tracking. Range 100,000 kilometers. Railguns coming into range. All batteries, fire at will. The Prometheus shuddered as its kinetic weapons opened fire, sending streams of high-velocity projectiles toward the enemy formation. At this range, the railgun rounds would reach their targets in less than 2 seconds, giving the Zephyrians little time to react. 2 of the missiles found their targets, exploding against the shields of the lead dreadnought in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. The third missile was intercepted at the last second, but not before damaging the point defense systems of the second enemy ship. Direct hits on the lead vessel. Their forward shields are down to 60%. Incoming fire. Rodriguez shouted. The Prometheus twisted desperately as all 3 dreadnoughts concentrated their fire on the small human ship. Energy beams seared through space, one of them clipping the ship's starboard armor and sending a shower of sparks across the bridge. Hull breach on Deck 7. Damage control teams responding. Chen ignored the damage reports, focusing on the tactical situation. They had hurt the enemy, but not enough. The Zephyrians were adjusting their formation, trying to box in the human ship where their superior firepower could finish it quickly. Emergency turn to port. Take us toward the second dreadnought. Ma'am, that's taking us directly into their firing arc. That's exactly where I want to be. Rodriguez, prepare firing solution Beta 3. The Prometheus rolled and accelerated toward the damaged Zephyrian ship, using its superior speed to close the distance before the enemy could react. At point-blank range, the ship's weapons would be able to penetrate even heavy shielding. Range 30,000 kilometers. All weapons, fire. Every gun on the Prometheus opened fire simultaneously. Railgun rounds slammed into the Zephyrian ship's weakened defenses while missiles detonated against its hull. The enemy vessel staggered under the impact, its shields failing and atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. But the victory came at a cost. The other 2 dreadnoughts had perfect firing solutions on the human ship, and their weapons struck with devastating effect. Direct hit on the port engine. We're losing power. Hull breaches on decks 5 and 6. Emergency force fields are holding. Weapons control is damaged. Railgun batteries 2 and 3 are offline. Chen felt the deck shudder beneath her feet as the ship took more damage. They had managed to cripple one enemy vessel, but 2 more remained, and the Prometheus was badly hurt. Status report. We've lost 40% of our weapons capacity and 1 engine is completely offline, Rodriguez reported. But the good news is the damaged Zephyrian ship is dead in space. We took out their main reactor. 1 down, 2 to go. Morrison, signal the refugee convoy. Tell them to increase speed. We need to buy them more time. The remaining 2 Zephyrian dreadnoughts were moving to flank the damaged human ship, their formation perfect and their intent clear. They meant to finish this quickly and brutally. Captain, Morrison said quietly, we're receiving a transmission from War Commander Thesek. Put it through. The Zephyrian commander appeared on screen, his scale features showing genuine surprise. Impossible. No single ship should have been able to damage a dreadnought of the Empire. What manner of weapons do you possess? The kind that work, Shen replied coldly. Commander, you've lost 1 ship and you're about to lose more. This is your last chance to withdraw. Withdraw? From humans? Thesek's voice carried outrage and disbelief. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered civilizations that span dozens of star systems. We will not be defeated by primitive apes. Commander, you're about to learn something about us primitive apes. We don't know how to quit. The transmission ended, and Shen turned to address her crew. Half the bridge stations were damaged, smoke filled the air, and she could hear the distant sound of damage control teams working frantically throughout the ship. But, when she looked at the faces of her Marines, she saw only determination. Rodriguez, how many missiles do we have left? 4 tubes loaded, Captain. That's all. Morrison, what's the status on the refugee convoy? They're making good speed toward the system edge, but the Zephyrians could still catch them if we don't keep these 2 ships busy. Chen studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage. The 2 remaining dreadnoughts were approaching in a coordinated pattern, clearly intending to finish the battle quickly. But there was something in their formation that gave her an idea. Rodriguez, I want you to plot a course that takes us between those 2 ships. Close enough to use our remaining missiles at point-blank range. Captain, that's a suicide run. We'll be taking fire from both sides. Maybe. But, if we can damage both ships, we might be able to level the playing field. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. I know this looks impossible. I know the smart thing would be to withdraw and call for reinforcements. But, those refugees don't have time for us to be smart. They need us to be Marines. Rodriguez straightened at his station. Course plotted, Captain. Taking us right down their throats. Morrison, signal all stations. Tell them to brace for impact. The Prometheus began its final attack run, accelerating directly toward the gap between the 2 enemy dreadnoughts. The Zephyrian ships immediately opened fire, their energy weapons converging on the approaching human vessel. Multiple hits. We're losing atmosphere on several decks. Main power is fluctuating. Backup systems coming online. Hull temperature is approaching critical levels. Chen gripped her command chair as the ship shook apart around them. Through the viewport, she could see the massive bulk of the Zephyrian ships growing larger as they approached. Soon they would be close enough for their final desperate gambit. Range 15,000 kilometers. Both enemy ships have perfect firing solutions. All tubes, fire everything we have. For missiles launched from the dying Terran ship, followed immediately by the last functioning railgun batteries. At such close range, there was no time for point defense systems to react. The weapons struck both dreadnoughts simultaneously, their warheads detonating against hulls and shields in brilliant explosions. But the Zephyrians had their revenge. Energy beams lanced through the Prometheus, tearing through armor and structure like it was paper. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as systems failed one by one. Captain! Main reactor is going critical. We need to evacuate. Chen looked at the tactical display through the smoke and sparks filling the bridge. Both enemy ships were severely damaged, their formations broken and their advance toward the refugee convoy halted. She had done what she came to do. Morrison, signal the Valdari convoy. Tell them the path is clear. Message sent, Captain. They acknowledge and are proceeding to the system edge at maximum speed. Chen smiled grimly. Her ship was dying around her, but the innocents would escape. That was what mattered. All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill. As her crew began moving toward the escape pods, Chen took one last look at the tactical display. The refugee ships were almost clear of the system, their children safe from the Zephyrian hunters. It was enough. The Prometheus died as it had lived, protecting those who could not protect themselves. And, in the depths of space, 48 Terran Marines proved that sometimes the impossible was just another word for Tuesday. The escape pods tumbled through space like scattered seeds, carrying the survivors of the Prometheus away from their dying ship. Captain Chen watched through her pod's small viewport as her vessel finally succumbed to its wounds, breaking apart in a silent explosion that lit up the darkness. All pods, sound off, she commanded over the emergency communication frequency. One by one, her Marines reported in. 37 pods were functional, carrying all 48 crew members. They had casualties. Sergeant Williams was badly burned from the engine room explosion, and half a dozen others had various injuries, but everyone was alive. Captain, this is Rodriguez. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the direction of the Zephyrian fleet. Looks like they're regrouping. Chen checked her pod's limited sensor array. The two damaged dreadnoughts were indeed moving, though slowly and with obvious difficulty. Worse, she could see other signatures approaching from deeper in the system. The Zephyrians were bringing reinforcements. Morrison, what's the status on the refugee convoy? They're almost clear of the system, Captain. But, at their current speed, they won't reach safe space for another 6 hours. That was the problem. The escape pods had maybe 4 hours of life support, and no faster-than-light capability. They were sitting ducks, and, once the Zephyrians dealt with the refugee ships, they would certainly come back to finish off the Marines who had humiliated their mighty fleet. Captain, came a new voice over the communication channel. It was the Valdari leader from the refugee convoy. We have monitored your sacrifice. Our ships are turning back to retrieve your escape pods. Negative, Chen replied immediately. Continue on your current course. Do not risk civilian lives for us. With respect, Captain Chen, our people have voted. You saved our children. We will not abandon yours. Before Chen could protest further, her pod's proximity alarm began chirping. She looked out the viewport to see one of the larger refugee ships approaching, its cargo bay doors opening to receive the escape pods. All pods, prepare for docking, Rodriguez announced. Looks like we're getting a ride. The refugee ship, which the Valdari called the Sanctuary, was a converted passenger liner that had been hastily modified to carry as many people as possible. Chen found herself standing in a cargo bay packed with hundreds of blue-skin aliens, all of whom seemed determined to thank her personally for what the Prometheus had done. Captain Chen, said the familiar voice of the Valdari leader, who had introduced himself as Council Speaker Javan. I wish we could have met under better circumstances. Chen looked around at the crowded conditions, seeing families huddled together with whatever possessions they had managed to grab during their evacuation. Children stared at her with wide eyes, and she realized that many of them had probably never seen a human before. Speaker Javan, you need to get your people to safety. The Zephyrians will be coming after us as soon as they repair their ships. About that, Javan said, his expression growing troubled. We have been monitoring Zephyrian communications. They are not just bringing reinforcements, they are calling this a matter of imperial honor. Your attack has humiliated them, and they cannot allow word of their defeat to spread. What does that mean? It means they will pursue us to the ends of the galaxy if necessary. And they will not show mercy to anyone who helped you. Chen felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. By saving these people, she might have doomed them to an even worse fate. Speaker, I'm sorry. We never meant to. Do not apologize, Javan interrupted firmly. You have shown us something we thought was lost from the galaxy, beings who will risk everything for strangers. That is worth any price. Rodriguez appeared at Chen's side, having been treating wounded Marines in the ship's medical bay. Captain, we need to talk. I've been analyzing the tactical situation, and we have problems. They moved to a quieter section of the ship, away from the crowds of refugees. Rodriguez activated a portable holographic projector, showing the current position of all ships in the system. The Zephyrians have 9 more dreadnoughts en route. They'll be here in about 3 hours. The 2 damaged ships are almost back to fighting condition. And they've deployed patrol craft to cut off our escape routes. Chen studied the tactical display grimly. So we're trapped. It gets worse. I've been talking to some of the Valdari military officers in the convoy. The Zephyrian Empire has declared the entire Valdari species to be enemies of the state. They're not just planning to wipe out these refugees, they're going after every Valdari colony in the galaxy. The scale of the genocide being planned was staggering. Chen had thought they were dealing with a local conflict, but the modified survey drones streaked through space like angry hornets, their improvised explosive payloads racing toward the unsuspecting Zephyrian dreadnought. War Commander Thesek watched in confusion as dozens of small objects launched from what should have been a defenseless passenger liner. "What are those?" he demanded from his bridge crew. "Unknown, War Commander. They appear to be some kind of probe or..." The first drone impacted the dreadnought's shields in a brilliant explosion that lit up the bridge displays. Then, another. And another. Within seconds, 30 improvised missiles were detonating against the massive ship's defenses, each explosion weakening the protective barriers that kept the vessel safe. "Shields down to 40%, shouted a Zephyrian technician. "How is this possible?" Thesek snarled in rage and disbelief. "They are civilians. They have no weapons." But, across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out as the other refugee ships revealed their hidden fangs. The deep core emerged from behind a piece of debris, its industrial mining lasers carving deep gouges in the hull of a surprised escort vessel. The research ship Quantum Explorer had turned its sensor array into a focused energy weapon that overloaded the electronics of another Zephyrian ship. Captain Chen watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the sanctuary, feeling a fierce satisfaction as the enemy fleet struggled to adapt to their new reality. "Morrison, signal all ships. Begin Phase 2. The apparently panicked refugee convoy suddenly changed formation, moving with military precision to surround the scattered Zephyrian vessels. What had seemed like random flight patterns revealed themselves to be carefully planned tactical maneuvers designed to split the enemy force. "Impossible!" Thesek roared as his tactical display showed the true situation. How did prey animals coordinate such deception? His answer came in the form of Captain Chen's face appearing on his main screen, her expression calm and determined. "War Commander Thesek, this is Captain Sarah Chen. I believe we had an appointment. You. How did you survive the destruction of your ship? We're harder to kill than you thought. Just like these refugees you've been hunting. Commander, you have one chance to surrender. Order your fleet to stand down, and we'll allow you to withdraw." Thesek's scaled features twisted with fury. "Surrender? To humans and their pet aliens? I am a war commander of the Empire. I have conquered star systems. Then, you should know when you're beaten. Your ships are surrounded, your formation is broken, and you're outnumbered." "Outnumbered? I have 11 dreadnoughts." Chen smiled coldly. "And I have something you don't understand. Humans who refuse to quit, and allies who fight for their children. That's worth more than all your dreadnoughts combined." The transmission ended, and Thesek turned to his tactical officer. "How many enemy vessels are we facing?" 17 ships, War Commander. But most appear to be converted civilian craft with improvised weapons. Then, we destroy them all. Signal the fleet, full assault. Show these primitives the power of the Empire." But, as the Zephyrian ships moved to attack, they found themselves facing a very different kind of warfare than they were used to. The refugee ships didn't fight like military vessels. They fought like cornered animals protecting their young, using every trick and tactic they could devise. The sanctuary used its passenger loading tubes to launch boarding pods directly at the nearest dreadnought. Each pod contained 6 Terran Marines and a dozen Valdari veterans, all armed with personal weapons and enough explosives to cause serious damage. Boarding action on decks 7 through 12, came the panicked report from the Zephyrian ship. Unknown number of attackers. Similar reports flooded the communication channels as other refugee ships launched their own desperate assaults. The Valdari might have been civilians, but many of them were also parents whose children had been threatened, and they fought with a ferocity that caught the professional warriors completely off guard. Rodriguez led one of the boarding teams through the corridors of a Zephyrian escort vessel, his Marines working alongside Valdari civilians who handled their weapons with grim determination. "Hostiles ahead," shouted one of the Marines. A group of Zephyrian soldiers appeared around a corner, their energy weapons charging for a devastating volley. But, before they could fire, a Valdari engineer named Kellen threw himself between them and the Marines, absorbing the deadly energy blasts with his own body. "For our children," he screamed as he died, giving Rodriguez time to return fire with devastating effect. This scene repeated itself throughout the boarding actions. The Valdari civilians might not have had military training, but they had something more powerful: the absolute determination of parents protecting their families. They threw themselves into impossible situations, sacrificed themselves for tactical advantages, and fought with a savagery that left the professional Zephyrian soldiers shaken. Back on the bridge of the sanctuary, Chen coordinated the chaotic battle while monitoring reports from throughout the convoy. "Captain," Morrison called out, "the Deep Core has successfully disabled the engines on Dreadnought 4. But they're taking heavy fire. Signal Captain Velan to withdraw to safe distance. Have the Quantum Explorer provide covering fire. Ma'am, Boarding Team 7 has taken the bridge of Escort Vessel 6. Rodriguez is requesting permission to turn their weapons on the other enemy ships." "Permission granted. Tell him to target the damaged dreadnoughts first." The battle raged for 3 hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Zephyrians had superior firepower and armor, but the refugee convoy had desperation and creativity. Every time the Empire's forces thought they had the upper hand, the humans and Valdari would pull some new trick out of their rapidly emptying bag. "War Commander," a Zephyrian technician reported to Thesek. "We have lost 4 escort vessels and 3 dreadnoughts are severely damaged. Our casualties are approaching 60%. Thesek stared at his tactical display in disbelief. How had a fleet of civilian refugees managed to inflict such damage on the might of the Empire? It went against everything he had been taught about warfare and the natural order of the galaxy. "Sir," another technician called out. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Multiple ships incoming at high velocity." Thesek felt his blood run cold. "Identification?" "Terran warships, sir. 36 vessels in battle formation. They'll be here in 2 hours. The war commander closed his eyes, finally, understanding the trap he had walked into. The refugees hadn't been trying to escape, they had been buying time for their reinforcements to arrive. And now the full might of the Terran Navy was bearing down on his broken and scattered fleet. "Signal all ships," he ordered quietly. "Prepare for emergency withdrawal." But Captain Chen had been monitoring Zephyrian communications, and she wasn't about to let the architects of genocide escape justice. "All ships, this is Chen. The enemy is attempting to withdraw. Do not let them reach hyperspace. Everything we've fought for depends on keeping them here until the cavalry arrives." The refugee ships surged forward with renewed energy, their improvised weapons blazing as they harassed the retreating Zephyrian fleet. The Sanctuary launched its remaining boarding pods at Thesek's flagship, while the damaged Deep Core used its mining lasers to cut through the engine section of another dreadnought. Thesek watched helplessly as his once mighty fleet disintegrated around him. Ships that had terrorized dozens of worlds were being destroyed by converted civilian vessels crewed by refugees and a handful of human marines. It was impossible, but it was happening. "War Commander, the humans are jamming our hyperspace engines. We cannot escape." "Then, we fight," Thesek growled. "Signal all remaining vessels. If we are to die here, we take as many of them with us as possible." The final phase of the battle was the most vicious yet. Knowing they were trapped, the surviving Zephyrian ships turned their full firepower on the refugee convoy in a desperate attempt to inflict maximum damage before the Terran fleet arrived. The passenger liner Hope's Dawn died in a brilliant explosion, taking 300 Valdari civilians with it. The research vessel Quantum Explorer lasted another 10 minutes before overwhelming fire breached its hull and sent it tumbling into the void. But, for every refugee ship that died, the survivors fought with increased fury. Chen found herself standing in the smoking wreckage of the Sanctuary's bridge, personally manning a damaged weapons console as her ship dueled with Thesek's flagship. "Captain!" Morrison shouted over the sound of explosions and failing systems. "Hyperspace signatures detected. The Third Fleet is here." Through the main viewport, Chen could see the most beautiful sight in the galaxy: 36 Terran warships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The lead vessel was the heavy cruiser Indomitable, Admiral Webb's flagship, and its weapons were already charging for battle. This is Admiral Webb to all friendly vessels. Stand clear. We'll take it from here. The arrival of the Third Fleet marked the beginning of the end for the Zephyrian Expeditionary Force. The massive Terran warships, equipped with the latest weapons and manned by crews eager to avenge the massacre they had discovered, fell upon the scattered enemy vessels with devastating efficiency. War Commander Thesek watched from his damaged bridge as ship after ship of his once proud fleet was destroyed by the humans' overwhelming firepower. These weren't the primitive apes he had expected, these were seasoned warriors with technology that matched or exceeded anything the Empire could field. War Commander, his communications officer reported, Admiral Webb is requesting our surrender. Thesek looked around at his ruined bridge, at the bodies of his crew, at the tactical display showing his fleet being systematically annihilated. He had a choice to make: surrender and face trial for war crimes, or die with whatever honor remained to him. Signal the Admiral, he said finally. War Commander Thesek surrenders his remaining forces unconditionally. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. As Chen stood among the survivors on the bridge of the sanctuary, watching the Terran fleet secure the battlefield, she realized that everything had changed. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as protectors of the innocent. The Valdari refugees were safe, but their rescue had cost the galaxy dearly. The Zephyrian Empire would not accept this defeat quietly, and there would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more heroes needed before peace could be restored. But, for now, it was enough that children would sleep safely, that families would remain together, and that the galaxy had learned an important lesson: when innocent people called for help, humans answered the call. Even when the odds were impossible. Especially then. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Valdari Memorial Station, watching the steady stream of ships arriving from across the galaxy. Representatives from 57 different species had come to attend the ceremony that would officially establish the Galactic Protection Accord, a treaty that would forever change how civilized worlds responded to genocide. Captain Chen, came a soft voice behind her. She turned to see Speaker Javan approaching, though he looked very different from the desperate refugee leader she had first met. He now wore the formal robes of a Valdari Council elder, and his bearing spoke of someone who had found hope after experiencing the worst that the galaxy could offer. Speaker Javan. How are your people settling in? Better than we could have hoped, he replied, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. The Terran Confederation has been more generous than we ever imagined. 3 new worlds, full citizenship rights, and protection under your naval umbrella. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Chen shook her head. You don't owe us anything. What we did was just basic decency. Basic decency that saved 12 billion lives, Javan reminded her gently. The Zephyrian Empire's other cleansing operations were stopped because of what happened here. The 47 Valdari colonies that still existed were evacuated before the Empire could reach them. Through the viewport, Chen could see the massive bulk of the UES Redemption, the newest and most powerful ship in the Terran fleet. It was one of 12 such vessels being constructed specifically to respond to humanitarian crises across the galaxy. The ship's design incorporated lessons learned from the desperate battle they had fought here, optimized for protecting civilian vessels rather than conquering enemy worlds. Captain, Javan continued, I wanted to thank you personally before the ceremony begins. Not just for saving our people, but for showing the galaxy what it means to be truly civilized. Chen was about to respond when her communicator chimed. Captain Chen, this is Admiral Webb. Please report to Conference Room Alpha. We have some visitors who specifically requested to meet with you. On my way, sir. She made her way through the station's corridors, passing displays that documented the rescue operation and its aftermath. The Battle of Kepler 442 had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy, studied in military academies and cited in diplomatic negotiations. But Chen had never been comfortable with the heroic narrative that had grown up around their actions. Conference Room Alpha was crowded when she arrived. Admiral Webb stood at the head of the table, flanked by several high-ranking officers from various alien species. But it was the group of beings near the viewport that caught Chen's attention immediately. They were clearly from different species, some humanoid, others completely alien in appearance, but they all wore similar expressions of quiet determination. One of them, a tall reptilian creature with golden scales, stepped forward as Chen entered the room. Captain Chen, I am Commander Vexus of the Hegemony Defense Force. 6 weeks ago, your intervention saved my homeworld from Zephyrian occupation. Another being, this one resembling a large insect with crystalline wings, moved forward. I am Hive Speaker ZYX of the Chitani Collective. The defensive tactics you developed at Kepler 442 allowed our forces to break the siege of our primary nesting worlds. One by one, the alien officers introduced themselves and explained how the rescue of the Valdari refugees had led to the salvation of their own people. The story was always the same: the Zephyrian Empire had targeted them for destruction, confident that no one would intervene. But the example set by the Prometheus and her crew had inspired others to take action. Captain, Admiral Webb said when the introductions were complete, I thought you should know the full scope of what you started here. The rescue of 17 refugee ships has led to the largest military coalition in galactic history. 43 species have pledged ships and personnel to the new protection fleet. Chen looked around the room at the assembled officers, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she had felt when facing the Zephyrian dreadnoughts. Admiral, what exactly are we building here? Something that should have existed long ago, Webb replied. A force dedicated to protecting innocent life, regardless of species or political affiliation. The Galactic Protection Accord establishes the legal framework, and these officers represent the military commitment from their respective governments. Commander Vexus stepped forward again. Captain Chen, the protection fleet needs experienced leadership. Officers who have proven they will fight impossible odds to defend the innocent. Would you consider accepting command of the 1st Humanitarian Squadron? The offer was tempting, but Chen found herself thinking about her Marines, scattered now across different assignments throughout the fleet. Commander, I'm honored by the offer. But my people and I are Marines. We follow orders and complete missions. Captain, said another voice from the back of the room, perhaps we could discuss what kind of missions those might be. Chen turned to see a figure she recognized from news broadcasts, Secretary General Martinez of the Galactic Council. The elderly diplomat moved forward with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades navigating the dangerous waters of interspecies politics. Mr. Secretary General, Chen said, coming to attention. I wasn't expecting to see you here. Captain, 3 months ago, the Galactic Council was a debating society that talked endlessly about atrocities while doing nothing to prevent them. Your actions at Kepler 442 have shamed us into becoming something more than that. Martinez activated a holographic display showing star charts of the galaxy. Dozens of systems were highlighted in red, indicating areas where conflicts were currently raging. The Zephyrian Empire has collapsed into civil war following their defeat here. Warlords are fighting for control of their territory, and civilian populations are caught in the middle. The Kytherian hegemony is conducting purification campaigns against 3 different client species. And these are just the crises we know about. Chen studied the display grimly. Every red dot represented countless innocent lives at risk, people who needed someone to care enough to help them. Captain, Martinez continued, the Council has authorized the formation of humanitarian response groups, rapid deployment forces specifically tasked with protecting civilian populations in crisis situations. We're offering you command of the first such group, with full authority to intervene wherever innocent lives are at risk. It was everything Chen had never known she wanted. The chance to lead a force dedicated to the principles that had driven her to defy orders 3 months ago. But she also understood the cost of such a commitment. Mr. Secretary General, I need to ask my people if they're willing to volunteer for this duty. We all signed up to serve humanity, but what you're proposing goes beyond that. Of course, Captain. Take all the time you need. Chen left the conference room and made her way to the memorial section of the station. Here, the names of everyone who had died in the Battle of Kepler 442 were inscribed on walls of polished stone. Marines and Valdari civilians, their names listed together as equals who had given their lives for the same cause. She found Rodriguez and Morrison standing before the wall that held the names of their fallen comrades. Both men looked older than they had 3 months ago, aged by the weight of what they had experienced. Captain, Rodriguez said when he saw her approach. How did the meeting go? They offered us a job. Leading humanitarian response missions throughout the galaxy. Morrison turned from the wall of names. Fighting impossible odds to save people we've never met? Something like that. Rodriguez grinned. Sounds like Tuesday. You haven't heard all the details yet. This would mean leaving the Colonial Marines and transferring to the Protection Fleet. Different command structure, different rules of engagement, and probably more battles like Kepler 442. Captain, Morrison said seriously, with respect, what do you think we joined the Marines to do? We signed up to protect people. The fact that some of those people aren't human doesn't change anything. Chen felt a familiar surge of pride in her chest. These were the same Marines who had followed her into impossible odds without hesitation, and they were ready to do it again. What about the rest of the crew? We can't make this decision for everyone. Already talked to them, Rodriguez replied. 36 of us want to volunteer for the new unit. The others are transferring to different assignments, with no hard feelings. We all understand that this isn't for everyone. Shen looked back at the wall of names, thinking about the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. The war against the Zephyrian Empire was winding down, but there would always be other conflicts, other innocent people who needed someone to stand between them and those who would do them harm. All right, she said finally. Let's go save some people. 6 months later, Captain Chan stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian, the flagship of Humanitarian Response Group 1. Her crew was a mixture of humans and aliens, all of them volunteers who had proven their commitment to protecting innocent life. Captain, reported Lieutenant Morrison from the communications station, were receiving a distress call from the Altair system. Civilian populations under attack by separatist forces. Time to intercept? 18 hours at maximum burn. Chen settled into her command chair, studying the tactical display that showed their current position relative to the crisis. It was a familiar routine now: emergency call, impossible odds, desperate civilians counting on someone to care enough to help. Take us in, she ordered. And signal the squadron. Looks like we have work to do. As the Guardian and her escorts changed course toward the Altair system, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that first distress call from the Valdari refugees. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, full of species that preyed on the weak and helpless. But now there were others watching, ready to respond when innocent people called for help. The Galactic Protection Accord had established the principle that genocide and mass murder were crimes against all civilized species, regardless of political boundaries. The protection fleet enforced that principle with ships and Marines who understood that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Captain, Rodriguez said from the tactical station, preliminary reports indicate we're looking at 6 hostile vessels attacking refugee convoys. Standard pattern. Any word on civilian casualties? Unknown at this time, but we're detecting active distress beacons from at least 12 ships. Chen nodded grimly. 12 ships meant thousands of innocent people, probably families fleeing from whatever conflict had erupted in their home system. People who deserved to reach safety, regardless of their species or politics. Signal the squadron, she ordered. Tell them we're going in fast and hard. No mercy for anyone who targets civilians. As the ships of Humanitarian Response Group 1 raced through space toward another impossible battle, Chen thought about the oath she and her Marines had taken so long ago. They had sworn to protect innocent life and defend those who couldn't defend themselves. It was a promise they intended to keep, one rescue at a time, for as long as there were people in the galaxy who needed someone to answer their calls for help. The stars ahead held new challenges, new threats, and new opportunities to prove that civilization meant more than just advanced technology and faster ships. It meant caring about strangers, fighting for principles, and never accepting that evil was inevitable. Captain Chen smiled grimly as the Guardian continued its approach toward the crisis zone. Somewhere ahead, people were counting on them to care enough to help. They wouldn't be disappointed.